welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot. And today's host, today, oh, I'm in rare form. Today's guest is Rob Yox from, I blanked on the name of your show. But
Full Spectrum Universe.
Full Spectrum Universe. And he is on the GERN Network, Global Enlightenment Radio Network. He's one of our other hosts. And while he's not been in the secret space program, he has investigated a lot of the UFO level. So his work is more grounded in reality. Not that mine isn't reality, it's just most of y'all think it's not. So he has more credibility than I do because of that. And
That's not true. That's not true.
I'm honored that he's on my show. So
it's an honor to be here, Penny. I've been waiting. I've actually watched this show for quite a long time, and to be a guest on it is truly awesome. Truly awesome. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really honored to have you here. When we were talking ahead of time, you said that you wanted to talk about where the United Nations had investigated UFOs and what the end result of that was.
Yes, I have. And, it's a big topic, too. We're going to get into
it. Is.
We're going to go back from a little bit of, I'm also like a historian by trade, too, and I believe that history repeats itself a lot. So I know that some of these past events gives us a look into almost a spectrum of what's to come, and or at least possibilities of what's to come. So when I look back at some of these things, I know with your secret space program knowledge, you may have a back door to what some of these manifestations that happen in United Nations when they're trying to bring things to pass, as in investigations of unidentified flying objects and things like that. Knowing what you know, and I know the secret space program has been going on for quite a while. A lot of this stuff starts in like 1967. Some of there was a lot of sightings, of course, during World War II. And once we started hitting rockets into World War II, they started watching more. But, I know that there's it coincides with each other, because when we look at these certain things that happen in the UN, a lot of them always fall short of being accomplished because of outside influence. So whether that's be to cover up that there actually already is a secret space program out there, or there's so many different ways that it can go. So when I run these by you, I definitely want to hear your take on all of it too, because it's super interesting to hear different aspects of how we look at these situations.
There's a lot of things. I look at them from the other side and I just giggle about what people say, which is probably rude, but at the same time, I'm aware they don't have the information that I do.
That's right. And it's to look at it from both aspects could kind of maybe give a clear picture of a different style timeline than what we're used to seeing maybe in history books or through people who are more on the surface level of things, as opposed to diving deep into what the actuality of the situations really are,
Yeah. There's a lot of people that they think it's cool until they realize it's real.
Well, that's exactly right, and I never claim myself to be anything that I'm not in any sense. But I do have this drive to understand further. So I do a lot of that research on both sides of the spectrum. And the other thing that I think that everybody, when it comes to critical thinking and looking at specific situations, you should be open to every avenue or aspect of that situation, regardless of how fantastical some may seem or not. Because what that is reality is perception. So it's that person's perception which becomes the reality. Just like as if a surface level, something happens, we're looking at it from somebody's perspective who is only surface level. When we dive deeper into different theories of what may happen, it opens up your mind into different modes of thinking, I guess you could say, to make things, be a little bit. it's hard to explain. Like it's something that really you take a tactical situation and you look at it from every angle. It gives you a broader picture, and it also gives you more power for theory of what the actuality of it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, what I found with me talking is there are people who are obsessed with the idea that there are no ETs, that this is all either humans or demonic. And they're like really into religion. And just above them are the ones that think, well, okay, ETs may be real, but I don't interact with them, so it doesn't matter to me. And then there's the ones that have had ET encounters, but they really don't remember a lot. And they tend to be obsessive. And then there's the level where you start remembering the levels of involvement. And a lot of those people are on the edge of sanity because it is so unbalancing
Hmm.
to have such experiences that are so outside of the common experience of humanity. I mean, it's like we're all in the same timeline together, we're all in the same dimension together, but we're experiencing life so much differently from each other. So,
I absolutely agree with that. And one of the things that I tend to say to people that say, well, if it's ufology, it can't be religious, and if it's religious, it can't be ufology. I try and look at I pose a question to them and I say, well, let me ask you this: what if the religion that you so choose to follow, which, I am a religious person too, but what if that religion that you so choose to follow, those ETs actually instilled on us because it was their background to their civilization as well? And they look at you and they go, well, do you really
yeah.
think? I said, well, if you look at what the Bible writes, you can literally map through ancient civilizations how many times the same story has been told, especially of the Great Flood. If you take that as just an
Uh-huh.
example, they have that in Egypt. They have that in basically in the Hebrew Bible, in the Catholic Bible, in the Islamic, the Torah, and then the Islamic writings, the ancient Sumerian writings, the ancient Chinese writings, the ancient Mongolian writings, the ancient Russian type of Indians that came across the ice bridge that were brought these native people to America. I mean, they literally have so many incantations of this same event. What's to say that some of those What's to say that some of those events even happened on this planet? What if they happened off world and that text was actually a derivative of an alien civilization coming here, which goes in hand with Atlantis and Lumeria? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So
Um,
it's pretty wild.
in my research into Anunnaki, it became pretty obvious that when you compare the Sumerian tablets with the Bible, especially Genesis, that we were created by the Anunnaki to serve them. That's how the Bible puts it. But when you take a look at how that service was to be accomplished, it's basically manual labor and mining, farming, taking care of their temples, which were their homes, and that sort of thing. So the religions that people were taught were what their owner, Anunnaki, wanted them to know. And some of it's true and some of it's not.
Well, absolutely. I agree with that too. There's no definitive path that we have for this religious, whatever it may be, with religious textiles or things like that, and conscriptions. And if you notice that with that Anunnaki, the ancient Egyptians kind of molded their civilization from the Anunnaki with having temples and instilling a slave
Mhm.
race. And that slave race took care of their farms, it mined for them, it built for them. So it's sort of like this lineage that's in the DNA of these of whatever they may be, because of course Tutankhamun's father was supposedly uh, half of a different alien race and human, was a hybrid. There's a lot of different stories that would make that reality actuality.
Yeah.
You know, and I love these conversations too because they get so philosophical with different aspects. But it's funny because you can always find a common ground, and I think that finding that
Yeah.
common ground is super important because now both of our brains are wrapped around this subject, and we're coming to conclusions that maybe weren't available to each other before, which is really great. And I enjoy those conversations, and I truly love the exploration of anything. And I'm truly an open-minded person in the sense that I don't know everything, and I actually probably know half of nothing. So,
I don't know everything either. I just talk about the things I do, and the things I don't, I just sort of stay away.
right. One of the great things I love about that too is like you'll start with a theory, and then you'll get halfway through it. You'll be like, wait a minute, that kind of doesn't make sense. Let me backtrack a
Yeah,
little bit and think
exactly.
about it again, and be like, okay, let me try this one more time. Let me try one more time.
And I've always been someone who thought differently. I was a truther before there was such a thing, and I I guess the CIA called us conspiracy theorists because we didn't believe the official doctrine about the JFK assassination. So that was where I started. And I've done lots and lots and lots of history research because I figured out right away what they were teaching for history in school was, I can cuss on this show, it was full of shit.
Agreed. Agreed. They always say
And
history is derivative of the winner. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
well, sometimes it's derivative of the loser. It depends on who wrote the book.
That's
So
true. That's true.
that was something that came up. I'm going to drop a name. Robert Sepper is a friend of mine. And he recently came out with a video about how the Romans had viewed Germania back 2,000 years ago. I believe it was Tacitus he was talking about. And my comment when he posted it was, oh, so we're going to believe what our enemies say about us. I wonder what the Russians and Chinese are going to say about America.
It's, it's funny you say that because when you look at those history books, they're literally there's like this. It's how do I describe this properly? Like each different like state or country has their own view because of their own political ideologies to make
Mhm.
these books what they are. And that's one of the
Exactly.
reasons that I love exploring. Like you take your history, right, or a history written by an American man who made a textbook, and that textbook's in front of you. And I was always one of those people who looked at it and say, "Well, is that 100% right? Because half of that doesn't make sense." So let's go into the Chinese version of that incident. The
Yeah.
Chinese version is different, and then you look at that and you say, "Well, that doesn't truly make sense either." But if we put them together, you're getting a better picture, you know. And then you do it with all these different types of textbooks, and it's weird too because these textbooks are such a falsity to what actually happened. It's like such a difference when you're looking at firsthand, like interviewing a person who was there. I
Yeah.
know reading a textbook is like two totally different things. It's like yin and yang in the situation. It's like, holy cow, like my mind's blown right now. I really have to stop, process this, and think about what I think is the truth, you know?
Yeah. That's what I've ended up having to do about a lot of these people. Example, Christopher Columbus.
Hmm.
I was raised that he was this wonderful man who discovered basically the islands in the Caribbean, and from him, all of the all of the American continents, both of them were discovered by Europe, and the implication was that there were no people here. And I I started exploring my Cherokee heritage because I am a descendant, but not close enough for blood quantum. And those who understand that system will know what I'm meaning. My Cherokee were 200 years ago. So, but it's still part of my personal heritage. So I did some looking into it and found out the horrors this man did, which led me to order a copy of his diary that's translated into English. Now that's an interesting read.
I haven't read it, but I understand that there was some atrocity things that he did, and I agree that they were super bad too.
He
And
was responsible for the death and destruction in one generation of 10 million people.
correct, and it goes back to that
Personally,
time too. Right.
personally responsible. And it was such an atrocity that he was recalled back to Spain and spent the rest of his life in prison because it was
Correct.
too much even for them.
Well, that's the thing too, is those Spanish monarchs were no saints either, and it was
Yeah,
kind of par for the course for the times too, because it went with serfdom and a caste system, and the caste system, if you're not on the top or upper echelon of the caste system, society is not your friend. It never will be, and it never has been, and that's it's a
well,
terrible thing
there's
too. It
kind of a reason for that.
Well, correct. It's bloodlines and
We
things like
have
that.
two species here coexisting, and there's been a lot of inbreeding in between. So you generally find three classes: the very rich, who are one species, the middle class, who are the half breeds, and the poor, who are the other species.
I agree with that 100% too. I've done some looking into that as well, and it's wild, And like you said, like we're talking about the perception of what you learn as per what actually happened is just it's night and day, and it's frightening that you can be taught something at an impressionable age that may not be any semblance of the truth.
Oh,
And you
right.
look at this
I was
person and you're like,
I
oh,
was
he's
taught
a
we
great
were
man.
all I was taught as a child that we were all equal, that we're all equal before the law.
That's not true either. As we know, there is a
Yeah,
two-tier system, especially in this country as of right now, that is
there's
just
always
wild.
been a two-tier system that the elite are held to one set of standards and everyone else to another. This is the way it has always been as long as there have been both of those species here. And until the people are eventually told the truth, which I hope is going to be in my lifetime, then we're going to continue to play games walking around that truth. So,
It's pretty wild to think about that too. It's just I hope I see it too, Penny, and it's the ramifications of what that in details. It would be just incredible. With it's sort of like what people talk about the Great Awakening.
yeah,
And the Great Awakening kind of fits that bill. But is it really going to be as much as they say it is? Because people like us who have literally, had researched have seen these patterns, right? Where people
yeah,
thought that they were waking up to these monumentous moments that switched life forever on a scale of 0 to 100, or so 0 to 360 or 0 to 180. It doesn't happen the way that they always say it happens, and they proclaim it to be such a great event or such a big thing that it truly it dilutes what these awakenings really would be if everything came out.
well, I had the experience of an NSA agent using my remember code from when I had been mind fractured. And suddenly all of the memories from space came back, but they were in German. So since then, I've had probably 5 distinct moments in time where it was like, aha. And things started to make sense. A clarity came. And then there would be some sort of trigger event for the next one. And with each of them, my views have changed. And oh, the last one was probably last summer. It was an awareness of the two species and their interreaction with each other. And I'm probably on layer 9 of the rabbit hole at this point, and it's trying to relate to people that aren't even in the rabbit hole. That's difficult for me.
Absolutely, absolutely, because what I understand that 100%, because when you're doing your research and you're bringing it to somebody who's not even adept as you are, they look at you like, wow, really? Like you really like, and it's funny we talk about this because with my girlfriend, I used to, when I was looking at a lot of the things that are going on right now and explaining to her what was really happening at
Mhm.
a root level of Satanism and things like that, she was like, that's, that sounds fantastical, right?
Yeah,
And
it sounds
as
like you're making it up.
Right. And as more and more comes to pass that's being brought to the light, now she's starting to realize, and then she was never naive. She's always been very smart. But until you actually see some of it firsthand in a sense that it's in your face and raw, you know,
Mhm.
she's starting to be like, well, if that's possible, then maybe what you were saying wasn't so fantastical. This is wild. And, it's like that emoji where the head blows off, mind blown,
Yeah. You said before the show that you have a whole presentation. We're
I
using up
do. I
time.
do. That's
Okay.
okay. So, what we're going to talk about first is the stats of the UN when it
Okay.
comes to space programs, right?
Yeah.
So, this is as of 2018. And the reason why it's as of 2018 is because sometimes the different countries or governments, they lose facilities, they switch facilities. But as of right now, there are 72 governments that are or space agencies that exist around the world that are coveted by the UN. Okay,
That
14 of these,
that makes sense.
right? These are all different countries, different governments, and 14 of these agencies actually have launch capabilities. Right? There's
Hmm.
6 big ones, and
Hmm.
I'll explain why there's 14, but there's only 6 big ones. Of course, it comes down to money, the country. So
Well,
the
that's
first one,
because there were rights that came with being in the nuclear club.
correct,
So a
correct.
lot of poor countries put being nuclear ahead of their people just to have those rights.
Well,
Like
exactly.
like you're less likely to be attacked by the United States. That's a biggie.
Right. Well, that's true. And here's the other part of that too. Just because they're like with the capabilities of launching, right? Let's say we're United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll go to India for a rocket. Or no, we'll go to China for a rocket. We'll go to Saudi Arabia for the fuel for that rocket, and then we'll go to America for the technology. And then that rocket is going to launch out of India, but it
Yeah.
still has the United Arab Emirates symbol on it. So it's
Yeah.
like this is they all, they come together. But the 6 ones that actually launch aircraft are the China National Space Administration, the European Space Agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA, and
Uh,
the Russian Federal Space Agency, or the Roscosmos, as we call them, right? RFSA.
yes.
So,
Those are the ones on Earth that I know of that are the biggies. And you're right, there are others that are not.
right, right. And these are the ones that usually do operations. They send people to different planets, the moon and such. They have satellites in orbit where they can basically, where they get to explore a lot more of the surface of this planet than most people do. But
Mhm.
so this is what happens when smaller agencies try and get involved, like the Burmese. Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the things that we talk about is that
They call themselves Myanmar now.
the Myanmar, yes, but in 1967 they were the Burmese, which is where we're
Yeah.
going to start this because the next level to this is now that we have all these faring agencies that are exploring what's out there, or they say what is out there, they want to explore more that comes from out there, right?
Yeah.
So now that we have this uptick after 1950 of sightings, UFOs, crafts in the sky, lights, some of it can, like we said, some of it can be justified of terrestrial spacecraft. Some is, probably about 30% they can't account for. 60%, I would say, is terrestrial spacecraft from what they know of. Or
Yeah.
whether this terrestrial spacecraft have something to do with an alliance with a country, whether it comes from out there, they know what it is when it enters the atmosphere. Therefore, they don't label it as a unidentified flying object because they
Um,
know the civilization where it comes from.
there are 125 extraterrestrial races who have treaties to enter Earth space.
Exactly. And when one of those ships comes into Earth space, it's recognized because they do have that treaty, and that specific type of ship is basically either below radar or captured on radar and put aside because they know what it is. So
Um,
taking that into
there
consideration.
is the group that Trump is now calling his Space Force.
Hmm.
Used to be called Earth Defense Force, and I know it's the same people because they're both run by the Air Force.
Correct.
And
I've read a lot about that too.
they have had an agenda that they had this list of 125 ETs that were allowed in, and everybody else got shot down.
That's exactly right. That's because from what I understand, there are specific extraterrestrial races that are protecting extraterrestrial airspace around this planet, or extra airspace that's
Well,
not within our
these are
atmosphere.
humans who are protecting.
Well, Space Force, yes, Space
Yeah.
Force is. I think that you're right. They basically took one agency and made it
Hmm.
more mainstream and coincided it with a branch of the military instead of just being a part of a branch. They are their own branch now.
Yeah. But
So
the point was that they made it public,
right, right. So
no
they gave it
longer
a name. Like
classified. They're
right.
pretending they're starting over now. So the last 70 years of history doesn't exist. But
But isn't that the
it,
truth? They're doing that with a lot of stuff on this planet. That stuff
yeah,
didn't exist. Yeah, bullshit. Yeah, it did. We know it. We know it. You know.
yeah, you don't suddenly have these capabilities without some sort of research and development.
Well, exactly. So let's think 1967. Okay, what it was like for people like yourself to come forward, or people who just had an experience where it was with an extraterrestrial. Period. Coming forward, it was a totally different ball game than it is right now.
Oh,
Right.
you were asking to be put in a nut house.
Correct, correct. So now we have these officials in the body of the United Nations in 1967, a gentleman by the name of U Fant, who was a Burmese diplomat, and he was the first non European to be elected to the Secretary General in 1961. Okay. So not
Hmm.
only did this man coveted power within a structure that was mostly white people or European for that matter, he is an outsider going into these delegations saying that he wants to explore, you know, he wants to explore these unidentified aircraft that are coming in.
Hmm.
And this is how he got to that point. So basically, he was the man who helped de escalate the Cuban Missile Crisis with JFK and the Soviet Union. So you know he's reputable in that sense of the word, that he's
Yeah.
delved into some crisis within this
That was a
body.
pretty big mess.
Right, right. So he was actually presenting interest in UFOs, and he confided in his friends that the UFO issue was the most important issue facing the United Nations, saying that this is the biggest thing that's going to happen now. So,
He
in
was
19
right.
exactly in 1967, UFANT arranged for James MacDonald to give a UFO presentation at the United Nations and Outer Space Affairs. Right? It was a group. The Outer Space Affairs group is a committee put together by the United Nations that basically does nothing. They just watch these rockets go out to orbit the atmosphere and hang out, and they get telemetry back, and they're like, "Yay, outer space!" Like they really think they went somewhere, but they didn't. So, so
It
with
was a
this,
big deal to get out of Earth's gravity well.
that's true. That is true.
Okay,
But
give it, give them their props for the level they were operating at. That was a really big deal, a major accomplishment.
well, here's what I wanted to ask you: when did the secret space program really start for most people? In the 60s, correct?
No,
Before that?
the Germans were in space. Well, I should say the German aristocracy was in space in the 1930s, early 1930s, before the war.
So think about it this way now, and that's why I wanted you to add to this conversation, because we're talking about 40 years later, right?
Okay,
So
what we've got going is the German aristocracy went into space, and they were also initially behind what turned into the Hitler regime. And what they were trying to do was save their people from starvation, which is what was happening after World War II. And when Hitler stopped listening to them and started listening to the Jesuits, they gave up and they moved their people to Antarctica. And at that point, they went into space because the Tula Society had the hardware and the Royal Society had contact with the ETs, and these were the boys and girls of the elite. So they were in the same families and they would talk about it at home.
well,
So
that's part of what the United Nations was put together by a few of these families
yeah,
that were of the elite. So they would
exactly. So
know.
these were the German aristocracy went into space, and they had an alliance with several ET groups because of the Vril Society, Maria Orsich. And so every square inch in space is already owned by somebody else. So they had to sublease from somebody. And that ended up being the Draco. And the Draco never gave them hardware, they never gave them technology. They only gave them a place to live.
Well,
Everything else they got from other ETs or from their own creativity. And when they went first to the moon and then to Mars. And then they figured out that their um, anti-grav machines could travel in time as well as space. And they went as far back as 400 years to set up colonies out in deep space, outside the solar system. And the Draco had shown them the ancient builder race um, portal system. And that's what the solar knot really is, that wavy thing that people are not allowed to show anymore. That's a stylized map of the portal system in the galaxy.
now
So,
taking that information, okay, aside from the time travel aspect of it, but taking what you just said is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring these situations up that happened, because if you notice the repetitiveness of these specific situations is that they only got so far. Like within mainstream society or the news, or what they were trying to do is there was always some underlying force that stopped it from becoming a reality.
Hmm.
These specific programs coming into play. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because even like, and you're going to see how far these people tried to get this out, and they were stifled somehow by something or an event or someone. And I
Well,
believe that a lot of that was predetermined because they weren't allowed to. If they would have had these groups that were inspecting UFOs coming in and out, things would have become a lot more real for them.
that particular group was set up in the 1980s, I understand. So this would have been sometime after the 67 UN investigation.
Okay. Okay. So to go further now, he basically asked this gentleman by the name of McDonald to come in, and he asked the UN to begin the study of UFOs. So they went to a couple of UFAT's meetings because of the war in Vietnam. They were only half stacked. There wasn't everybody there. The Vietnam War was starting to put pressure on the UN to, because Vietnam was not an American war; it was the United Nations war. We were just the foot
Technically,
soldiers. So
technically,
technically correct, but we were the army behind it all. We were the ones that were doing.
we were the ones that started it. We were the ones that enforced it. We just basically dragged them into it. And the event that they used as an excuse to start it had actually not happened. They just said it did in the American media.
Well, you have to remember too that most of these wars are, both sides are funded by these elite families, regardless
Hmm.
of what nation it's in. Or so
You have to have a war if you're going to sell munitions, and munitions are one of the top three items sold in the world.
exactly. So basically, these wars are set up to stifle certain things too. And what they're trying to do is there was a big push in 1967 for this UFO disclosure, and then the Vietnam War breaks out. They can't pass anything. Basically, this gentleman tries to address the UN again and again and again. And there was a series of ordeals that they were specific about with these UFO phenomenon. And eventually, UFAT decided to just not pursue it anymore because he was stifled so many times. I just said, you know what, that's fine. We're not going to do this anymore. And it became this really big thing because this is also a time, during this time, within the confines of culture, UFOs were kind of a big deal. Star Trek was coming out. So there was a lot of things that were like pushing
Well,
for more of this disclosure.
in 1965, there were a lot of UFO sightings in the United States.
Hmm.
And I remember this because I kept a scrapbook of them. And people would see saucers, people would see glowing spheres, and they would always be told it was swamp gas or weather balloons and discredited. And most of the people ended up wishing they had never said a word.
Well,
Uh,
I'm gonna play on that right now. So this gentleman, this physicist, Mr. McDonald, right, or
yeah.
Dr. McDonald, who every time that they start something in the UN, right, UFAT had to find a sponsorship via a country. So
Yeah.
when he went to McDonald, he had talked to McDonald about the U.S. because Burma at the time was a small country, so they needed somebody to back them. So they wanted U.S. to back them, and McDonald went to Congress to ask for this backing with the United Nations. Once this all fell through, McDonald went back to Arizona State where he was a physicist,
Mm.
and his wife left him. He ended up killing himself 5 years later. So, air quotes, killing himself
Yeah, I
because,
understand the air quotes because a lot of people in this community or related to it have turned up dead under suspicious circumstances.
Exactly, exactly. So this man was literally ostracized from science. He was
Yeah.
literally ostracized from science, so he lost his whole career that he worked for his whole life, and he committed suicide, and then that was that. Then that whole thing fell through. You never heard back from these people again, and it basically goes until 1978 where they try again, and this time it gets a little bit worse. But before we go into that, Penny, I want to know what your thoughts are on that specific situation that we just talked about.
Okay, what we had going from my side was the Hanabu ships were what people were seeing as saucers. Um, Up until the creation of the TR3 series in about 1985, that's the triangular ships, and they are built in an underground base in Utah, so they're American. But up until then, the ships that were seen were either Hanabu, which is the German basic ship, or the converted submarines that the Germans were using after that because they were more efficient for shipping cargo.
That would explain the 1965 cigar-shaped crafts that they saw throughout the sky.
Those were German ships,
Mm-hmm.
not German from Germany. And I need to make that clear because the German people in Germany are not involved with this. This is the people who left during or just at the tail of World War II and went to Antarctica. They're at that point, the two groups split, and we're talking totally different populations. The ones who went to Antarctica were not Nazis, they were still Germans, and they went into space, and their culture out there speaks German and has a Teutonic flavor, but is not. The Nazis were a political party, and they are not. So,
Well, that's a big misconception that people get wrong.
it
Nazis were
is.
literally a political party. They were not German. German ancestry is barbaric by nature, but not political
I
ideology.
wouldn't call them barbaric by nature. They're tribal, and
Tribal, yes.
there's been a lot of infighting between the tribes. They are a martial society, meaning that warriors for millennia, the warriors were who mattered. But they also had poets and theologians and musicians and everything else that you would expect from a culture, you know.
For the time period, yes, yes.
Yeah, for their time period, the reason that they were never a country before when they were was that they're tribes. And it took a while to unite these tribes. Their languages were slightly different, their cultures were slightly different, and they had been competing with each other for millennia. So it took a while for them to come together.
I have read a lot about that as well. And it's 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 its basis, its baseline was what this country is doing right now with tribalism. There's a
This
baseline for it.
this country, a lot of people don't realize that 50 million Americans have German descent.
I do. I have German
Yeah.
descent, I have Native American descent, and I have Italian descent. So I have all the
I'm
the
Merovingian
gambit.
and Cherokee.
I don't know. I'm so little Indian, but I don't know. It was like my great 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 grandmother was Indian, so it's diluted to a point where I can't. I don't know
My
exactly where
great
it's
great
from, but
grandmother was Creek, and um, my grandmother, one grandfather's mother's line goes back to Charles Parks, who was the American ambassador to Cherokee Nation and I'm descended from his Cherokee wife.
That's
So,
really cool to know that far back. I remember we talked about that before. Is our
oh,
family trees, which was pretty
yeah,
cool.
my tree. There are lines that can be tracked and lines that can't. And the lines that can, oh, gee, this last week I had the blues. So I was off Facebook, didn't interact with people, and I was just working on Ancestry. And I was working this stretch where that I had people had stopped. So yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Like when I work on my ancestry, like you do, I try and work on my ancestry as well. Do you get like a certain sense of like joy when you figure out these or maybe not joy, but like this elation when you figure out these pieces? You're like, oh wow,
Yes and
yeah,
no. Yes and no. It depends on who they were.
that's true. That's true. That's very true, Penny. I agree with that.
Um, I have as ancestors some of the most bloodthirsty people who have ever walked this planet. And some of them, when I find them in the tree, I'm like, oh my God.
Oh boy. Oh boy, that you know that equates to my morning attitude that I have sometimes. I get that.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and you read the stories because these were historical people that I'm descended from. I have one ancestor, Augustus Caesar, who got so angry with one of his wives and his daughter that he had them starved to death.
Jesus, that's a bad one.
Yeah,
That's a
I
bad
mean,
find.
um, John Lackland, John the First of England. He used to take women who turned down his advances and brick them inside the walls in the castle.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
wow. I think I
like I
remember
said,
hearing about that too.
these are nasty people.
It
Um,
happens though. We all have some kind of lineage that is, you know, dark, shall we say?
my family tree, the parts that are traceable before 1400 are mostly dark. And
That's wild.
I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, this isn't what I expected. At one
So
point, I asked Lou, my partner, I said, I have all these criminals and pushers and movers and badasses in my tree. You think they'd be ashamed of me for being what I am? The thought has to cross your mind.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
So
Oh
yeah,
man.
um, I do not have German descent. I do have Sephardi, which is the Jewish from the Middle East.
Hmm.
Um, but they lived in Alsace, which is Europe, and
Right.
um, my mother's mother was Jewish, and she was Christian before I was born, but she taught us to eat clean.
Hmm.
Not exactly kosher, but close.
Right. Right.
And so I have this mixed heritage of the three different ethnic groups because the Merovingians came through British. My Merovingians came through British royalty, and that's been one of the big shocks. I made a breakthrough in my dad's family. A friend in a Facebook group had a book that is out of print, and he looked up who a specific person's father was for me. And that made this huge breakthrough.
Wow.
And yeah, so I've been tracking that. And so that's been the newest thing is I made a breakthrough on my dad's family.
That's huge, though. I mean, a breakthrough can add up to, exponential amount of people that are now in your lineage that you did not know before, you know?
Yeah, well, my dad's family direct, dad, only went back 5 generations. And that man was married to a woman named Deborah Finley. And she was basically a princess. I'll just put it that way. And I kept wondering, because as far as I knew, that line was Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept wondering, why did this European princess marry this Cherokee man? Yeah. And that's been my whole reason for doing the family tree, was my father had dark skin. And nothing we knew of would explain it, because his father had dark skin and his father had dark skin. And those were the ones that I had seen during my lifetime. And there was no explanation for it in the tree. And there still isn't, because all of the records show that these are Europeans of mostly royal descent. And I'm like, what?
That's incredible, though. That's an incredible thing to find. I mean, that's like that equate. I'm sure that equated a lot for you. You figured out a lot, and it kind of gave you this wow. Okay, now
Yeah,
it makes
well,
sense.
all of my grandparents had lied about who we were. So
That
it
happens
was,
too. My great grandfather lied about who he was too, because when he came to the United States, being Italian in 1921 was not a good look. You know, so it was
no,
not
they
something that was
assumed he
pretty
was
cool.
mafia, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. He actually, he was coming into the harbor of Boston, and before he got to the harbor, he jumped off the ship and swam to shore because he didn't want to have to go through the regular process, the intake process, because he was
He was
afraid.
he was an illegal.
Pretty much, pretty much. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
One of my immigrant ancestors, um, William Smythe Bryan, he and his entire family were dropped offshore a quarter mile because Cromwell had left orders that they were to be drowned. And the ship's captain figured a quarter mile was far enough that those women were not going to make it in those big, heavy dresses.
That's when you ditch the dress and start swimming.
I don't know. They made it. I don't know how they did it, but they made it.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
None of them drowned, but I've read the records from the time. They were just absolutely mortified that Cromwell had ordered that.
Of course, of course. That's usually it's women and children first.
Yeah, usually, but the entire point was to rid himself of these people.
True.
Most of my immigrant ancestors were exiled by Cromwell.
Wow.
So those are the
Wow.
ones I can track from America back to the old country. So a lot of them, I have a name and it just stops
That's
when
fascinating stuff.
they came to America.
It's really
But
fascinating stuff.
But we're off topic.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I love doing that though, because you see now we went through this whole triage of what where we're from. So now when people listen to what we're saying, they can understand that we've done some of our research into who we are as well, and that actually helps you find yourself in doing what we do and being as upfront as we are about certain things. It's always great to know who you are.
When I found out who I was and started doing the research into what those people were about, is when I came to understand that there were actually 2 species here.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
you see it. That helped you. That helped you.
Came together. And that's an important understanding, because you cannot understand how this world operates if you don't realize there are 2 species.
I agree.
And that's the honest truth. You cannot fathom how it works otherwise. I mean, people want to call them the Illuminati, they want to call them the Cabal, they want to call them the elite, they want to call them whatever they want to call them. But the truth is, they're another species. And they have basically another religion that's their own. And they have variations of that. They're not all teaching the same thing, which is something people have to understand too. And those people have factions among themselves. And I've tracked at least 30 different groups of them that are infighting to be king of the world. Now, until people understand it's a separate species that's infighting amongst themselves, nothing will ever make sense.
Well, that's exactly right, because there's a human culture, and then there's a
Mm-hmm.
subculture that the human culture derives from. So really, the human culture is the subculture from another culture that was beyond what we know, and looking at
There
things like
were
we say.
there were the Anunnaki, as they're called in history. They call themselves Jahami. Below them are, I don't know, the name that I hear most is bloodline. So the bloodline is below the Anunnaki, and then you have Homo sapien.
That's
So,
I look at that, and that's what it's wild to think that, and some people, like we were talking about before, may think that's fantastical, but knowing that is your truth, when you look at situations and you do your research, you have to look at it from both of those angles. Who's pulling the strings where and why? Because
mhm.
a lot of human interactions are the result of strings being pulled on the bloodline level, and the bloodline interactions are being pulled from the Anunnaki level, and it
And
all works in a grand symphony. It's pretty wild.
the bloodline level is who's running the secret space programs.
Right, right. So
And they are pulling people who are half breeds to serve in the secret space program.
So that makes a lot of sense too, because somebody like myself, I've never, not that I know of, but I've never partaken in a secret space program, which would only in turn let me think that I'm just Homo sapien in that stretch of the word. You know what I mean?
Well, you'd have to do your tree far enough back to find out.
Well,
Um,
exactly.
I'm at the point where I'm understanding I'm a half breed. And they have told me I'm operating higher than they expected a half breed to do. They have contacted me in the last 3 years. So
I guess
I,
that's a good thing for you, but a bad thing for them.
I scared them because they didn't expect half breeds to operate at my level.
Which means that you see more than they want you to see, and that makes them upset.
um, they're trying to figure out if I can be useful to them or if, should I be eventually killed. That's the stage we're at now.
That's crazy to think about.
Oh, I speak what I understand and I keep my mouth shut about a lot of things I'm not certain of. And if I'm not sure of it, I don't say it. And there are certain groups that I don't mention at all, ever.
Right. Don't you wish everybody was like that, though? I mean, I try and hold to that practice too. If I don't understand something or know about it, I try not to speak about it, because, you may not realize that being, not saying you, but like people out there may not realize about talking about something that you don't have direct knowledge of can get you in trouble, and it can get you hurt in some
Mhm,
instances. And it's
mhm.
a terrible thing to say, but it's the God's honest truth. That's why if you don't know about specific subjects, I would reference you not to speak about them, because you don't know the repercussions of what you're saying.
Yeah. There are people who have chosen to tutor me, and those people I keep very tightly closed, not out of shame, but to protect them for having tutored me.
I, you
It's
know, That makes sense. To me, that makes sense. Some it may not, but to me, I understand it 100%. Like there's a lot of things that I delve into on a surface level that, it's not you delve into more of an ancestry level, but myself, I delve into a surface level. If there's certain things that I don't talk about aloud, because if I talk about what I know, it could get me in a lot of trouble, but could also put other people in danger because of the
Uh-huh.
research that I've done. And it's
Yeah, it would put these people in danger for having
even
tutored
just
in.
heard it, and
Yeah.
it's a sad thing to say that we can't be open like that, but it's a truthful thing.
Now, I am honoring that they went to the risk of teaching me so that I wouldn't be sitting there going, "What the hell?" So,
Right, right.
um, I appreciate it, and I'm not going to out them, and they have my personal loyalty for having done it. Um, I'm not going to cause them trouble. Now,
It's a great thing. I mean, I respect that
but
100%.
I'm not going to sit on knowledge of fraud either, though.
I see. That's like the caveat for that whole thing. And I get that 100% too. Penny, you have no idea. I get that. You cannot stand by while fraud is while something is going through a fraudulent stage and not call it for what it is.
Okay, so your UFOs prior to the 1980s
I have one more thing that's going to
are are
that's going to
almost,
coincide.
they are like 90% the German fleet in space.
Gotcha.
The other 10% are those 125 ETs.
Okay. So what about 1978? Would that be close enough to the 80s to maybe?
I'm thinking that that was the early stages when the tall whites were starting to give the Americans technology.
Well, here,
That was
this
that
story
was
I have coincides with that too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
time frame that I know of the tall whites showing up is they showed up about 75, 80 in that time period. And they made a treaty for bases on Earth because there were already tall white Anunnaki bases here in a rogue faction. And this was the other faction coming and saying, okay, we'll give you a drip of technology in exchange for bases so we can fight this other guy. So
Okay.
they had a reason. And instead of just ignoring the humans, since we had space flight, they had to talk to us. And so they made this deal with the American government. And the American government had been chafing because they were subsidiary to the Germans in space after Operation High Jump. So they wanted their own space programs. And the one with NASA had run into trouble on the moon because they had shot off a nuke. And there are a lot of beings who actually live on the moon, and they're not us. And they got really pissed and told them not to come back. And that's why we haven't been back to the moon.
I've heard that myself too. And it's funny that we just talked about that too, because this next story I have for you is direct interference from nations that have
Hmm.
treaties with these tall whites, which is what it is. So the second
Yeah.
attempt for this disclosure came in 1978. Okay. And it was from the person who tried to attempt it was the Prime Minister, Sir Eric Gary of Grenada. Okay. He
Okay.
attempted to bring disclosure to the United Nations, and in essentially doing that, he was sponsored by a gentleman by the name of Lee Spiegel, who was a Hollywood stunt guy or set creator, who also knew Steven Spielberg.
Hmm.
So what they did is they got people like Stanton Friedman and many others to, Dr. Robert Wood, Major Paul DeSuze, Dr. J. Allen Heinrich. They got a lot of these people to come in and
Yeah.
help them to present to the United Nations that they want to open up this forum where people can literally they wanted to give like a not only like a UN created group that investigated these things, they also wanted to take public experiences and file them in a sense of making like a database for it too, whether it be paper because they
Well,
didn't really have computers at the time either. But
isn't that what MUFON did?
MUFON did do that, but this is like on a different level. Like MUFON is like a civilian level. This is
Yeah.
like on a United Nations government level, kind of, shall we say?
Well,
So
I know the names that you said are all currently big names in the field, the UFO field,
mhm.
and UFO and SSP kind of overlap. Although the UFO people are pushing us out.
They're trying, but it's not going to happen because there's going to be things that come to light now, which is the last portion of the presentation, and it's actually happened yesterday. So it's it's
Really?
it's new information. Yeah,
Brand new news?
brand new
Cool.
news.
I got to hear this.
That's why it comes full circle, Penny. That's why I was so excited. It came out the day before. I was like, that wasn't the end of my presentation, but then I
Okay,
saw
let's
it
keep going.
yesterday. All right, you're like, all right, let's get there. Let's get there. Okay, so
We still have 40 minutes.
you got it. So basically, like, just to put this all in a nutshell, and then we can go into the newer stuff. But they made a presentation, graphics, movie, everything for this specific thing. And 4 days before they were supposed to go to the United Nations and see the committee, there was a revolution in Grenada where they overthrew the government and where the United States had to come in and back them up. So it scrapped everything. And Sir Eric Gary was now living in the United States because he was overthrown.
I was wondering if the Grenada invasion was related to that.
Right. And there was also ties to the families, the five families, with why that happened. There was a lot of
Five
money being,
families.
yes, there was a lot of money that were pumped into the rebel faction in Grenada to overthrow them, and they were supplied with arms and things like that. Come to find out down the line, the United States actually had a little bit to do with it as well. So, but
Well,
that was a longer one that I had, but I summed it up because there's a lot of inconsequential stuff. But this man still lives in the United States today. He was a young man, Sir Eric Gary, and it was pretty wild to look at that. And now, from your side of it, how does that coincide with the SSP a little bit?
uh, Eisenhower had ordered it to be extreme top secret on the same or above level of what the atomic weapons had been during and before World War II. So this was a direct order from Eisenhower that it be kept extreme high top secret, and that he couldn't handle the information. He freaked out over his personal interactions with ETs and did not believe that the average human could understand it.
You see how you get a better picture of the whole thing now? Once you interject what you're saying into what I'm saying, and how it becomes like a full circle now, and how the
Mhm.
understanding of these events truly gets brought to light on what's behind. Because when you read this, right, you're sitting there reading this from a standpoint of news articles. I even have like the declassified letters that were going back and forth between Sir Eric Gary and Lee Spielberg for creating this, and having them come.
Those would be incredible to publish.
They're actually on the internet. You can
Are
grab
they?
them. They've been declassified. They were
Awesome.
classified. They've been declassified. I do have one letter that was from Sir Eric, from some deputy secretary in the United Nations, asking Sir Eric Gary to cease and desist.
Ooh,
I don't remember his name. I have to look it up when my computer is
ooh.
back up. I will be able to get it. But it is, he was literally saying, "You're going somewhere where you don't know, and you're asking for things that can't be obtained." Is I think
Yeah,
what he said.
it was incredibly top secret because everything having to do with UFOs and space and who's actually running the world. um, it was an incredible thing. They went to a lot of trouble to discredit anyone who even sniffed the truth. And it's been going on since 1953.
So, like I said, there was a lot of intervening with people trying to come forward with these committees that basically with these committees that they're trying to, you know, expose what's going on. And there
Mm,
was some outside influence that stopped them. And one of the most recent affairs of this is in China. They were having a summit put together. And one of the things that's crazy about this is like there was a lot of things in China that don't, like, you can't talk about ghosts or paranormal. You get ostracized. So
really? I didn't
yes,
know that.
yes, and they don't believe in those supernatural things. Even though some of their religious beliefs go back to supernatural, they
Well,
don't.
their actual official religion is atheism. So,
Well, now it is, yes. So the only reason why they let this happen was because Xi Jinping's wife actually had a UFO experience.
mm,
So, with her interest in it, he was facilitating her by letting her put this summit together of people all around the world and all these different scientists coming together in China in 2017 and or 2018 to convene and speak. But when they first came together, it was just like a formation formality. So they
okay.
were waiting until 2020 to reconvene, and then coronavirus came on. So they're
That
not letting,
doesn't
and they were going to explore, right? So they were going to explore all this stuff too, and it's like, what else is going to happen that these people are going to get thrown off? But
Yeah,
you know, it it's crazy. It's
25
crazy.
million Chinese die from who knows what. That
Right.
where I Okay, for the people who wonder where I pulled that number, that was how many cell phones stopped working in China during the first 3 months of 2020. And it was the only accurate death rate we could find because the Chinese people are required to have a cell phone.
That's
It,
true.
so if they have discontinued their cell phone, they're dead.
That's true. That's crazy.
I mean, so there were 25 million cell phones less in 3 months. So that's the only accurate record we have
And,
now. How many of them died from COVID? Who knows?
well, that's true too. They were also barring people up in their homes and starving them to
Hmm.
death because of potential infection too. So
Yeah,
you
they
know,
were doing a lot of really crazy things that
a
were,
lot of bad stuff.
yeah, that was what was snuck out, was a lot of really bad stuff. And it makes you wonder, what was really happening,
Yep.
because COVID as it is in my little town, we have it since March, we have had 12 people die from it, and they all had other things wrong with them, like cancer. I mean, we're not talking little stuff.
Right.
So
More pre-mortal conditions.
yeah, they all had they were all already dying of something. So
So let's get to what I heard yesterday, so we can unpack this.
okay.
So we know that the United States had put in this within the government. They put in this task force that was looking into UAEs, unidentified anomalies
Yeah.
that were flying overhead. They actually expanded it yesterday to USOs, which is the unidentified
Hmm.
sea objects,
Yeah.
and also they are almost confirming that there is some kind of extra technology that we are not privy to that is in these machines. And they're almost confirming the sense of they are extraterrestrial. They are they have technology that we don't know about, but now they want to procure this technology, which they know is real, for themselves. So they're
Um,
coming out with that, and they made an official statement to the public about this.
who said this?
That was Marco Rubio saying it to the United States government.
Okay. So it was a real official person.
Yes,
Okay.
he is a
Now,
senator.
the Pentagon came out last year talking about the Tic Tac video, and they verified that yes, it was a real film, and yes, it came from them, and yes, that it was technology not from this earth, and that yes, they had some of it and had even reverse engineered it. And when that came out on the news in September 2019, my neighbors came and took me by the hand over to their apartment and said, "All right, Spill, we know you know about this." Yeah, the Tic Tac is a tall white ship. So, yeah. So, if it looks like a Tic Tac flying through space and it can make all kinds of weird maneuvers and then just pop out of view, that's tall white technology.
That's pretty exceptional. And the crazy thing about it is, with all this craziness that's going on through the year of 2020, people were predicting, well, what's next? Aliens? They're going to come out with disclosure?
Well,
Sure as shit they did, in a sense, you know?
Randy Kramer's been trying to generate consent for a hoax mounted invasion, and my attitude from the first time I heard it, I he was talking about it, and I was sitting there on a panel with him, and I screamed, "No!" I still say that, "No."
Well, that's just it. It's with these programs that they're talking about and these task forces. What are they really gonna? Is there gonna be a soft disclosure? Are they gonna give us everything? You know damn well they're not giving us everything. They never
Well,
will.
Randy said that his brigadier general said that the studies showed that there would be 15% of the population who would resist to the point of killing themselves and their family members if it were just telling people. But if there were a hoax invasion, where that it would only take them 6 weeks or so to get used to the idea, and then they'd be okay. And then they would say, "Guys, it was just to let you know." But
Well,
he also admits that there would be real casualties on both sides.
well, here's the other part of that too is, with the guise of these specific families trying to pivot power to all these places, if they did do an invasion type of hoax, under what circumstances would they try and regulate what man can do after that in the guise of the alien's name?
Well, that's going to be a problem. And I do know that there is a group of, I guess you could call them non aligned, um, star nations who are planning official first contact next year. They have not informed us yet which country they're going to plant it in, but they're planning on 32 star nations showing up in ships and landing somewhere together, and not in that nation's capital. So these are friendly folks. So
Would they be seen as that though, or would they be seen as a threat?
I don't know.
I'm sure
I
with
don't
their
know.
technology they could disarm anything that came their way, but you know,
One of them is in the category of watcher. They have been having bases and quietly observing us for the last 10,000 years. And they are the ones leading it. And they call themselves Ponti. And they are one of the gray races from the Zeta Reticulus system. There are, I understand, 5 planets there, and each one has a different gray race. And these folks have been watching us for a long time, and they think we're ready.
I think we're ready. I'm not going to lie about it. I think we're
I
ready.
think some of us are ready. I think there's a lot of religious fanatics who are not.
I think that would boost my research 100%. People would be like, wow, he really was forward thinking.
But yeah. So there is a telepath who speaks for them on Twitter, and her personal name is Sue Walker, and it's at Sandia Wisdom, I think, is the Twitter name. I know the Sandia part is right, so you can put in a search on Twitter for at Sandia, and the rest of it will come up. But
well, that's awesome.
I've been following them on Twitter for 4 years.
Have they been coinciding with this 1 year of the races? They've been speaking the same message.
They've been speaking the same stuff for a long time, and they were going to make it in 2024 and said that there was an unforeseen disaster coming, and so they were moving it up to 2021.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. But yeah, that's the presentation I have. Just to go over a few things that were I thought like you could definitely shed some light on for me. And you've shown me a lot of different things of what the different side of it that I didn't have knowledge of, that now I have to dive deeper and look into that aspect of it as well. So I thank you.
What I remember from space is that there are 6 major factions, and the major factions are the Germans out there, and the rest of them are all various Americans. And 3 of them are corporate. There's one that different people call it different things. The people I know who were in it call it either planetary corporations or alliance. And they are the biggest competitor with the Germans and have decided to start taking over German sites. And it's turning into a rather nasty war. And they're claiming, their whistleblowers on Earth are claiming things that I have no intel about it actually happening. And I still have alters active serving with the Germans. So I do get bleed over enough to have some idea of what's going on out there. I do know that the Germans were confronted by the galactic government, and you knew there had to be one, and are being sent back to the solar system because of atrocities that they have committed. Everybody out there commits atrocities. There's nobody out there that is pure, wise, innocent. Nobody. They go out there, they think they're no longer under anybody's rules, and they become almost animal. They're rooting around for resources. They want to make wealth, which is not exactly the same as money. And they want to have instead of having a house with a yard like you would want on Earth, they want a whole planet. And if there's already people there, they just start killing them off or rounding them up and selling them to Alliance to turn them into cyborgs for sale, because that's another form of wealth. And you can't turn an insectoid species into a cyborg, but the mammalian ones you can, yes, and most of the reptilians. So they're going onto these planets and they're just picking up innocent bystanders and turning them into robots. And that's what the Galactic Authority is pissed at them about, and has told them, you guys have to go back to the solar system. We're not going to let you play out here anymore. And some of those colonies the Germans have are 400 years old. And what we have is 1,000 major colonies with 1 to 2 billion people each, and all of those people are going to have to come back to the solar system. So those ships that you keep seeing pictures of people taking pictures of the sun with all these ships coming through them, those are ships bringing Germans back to the solar system.
I've seen that a lot too. They actually have a lot more of those as of late. A lot more.
Yeah, well, there's 1,000 colonies with billions of people. We're talking about over 1 trillion people are going to be brought back to the solar system. And they're not being settled on Earth. They're being settled on other worlds, moons of the gas giants, or in the Oort cloud. Most of the colonies were in underground cities anyway, so they're used to living underground, so the Oort cloud won't be a problem for them. It's just a matter of finding places that are not already occupied.
But that's definitely true. There is billions of people here, and I'm sure that they'll have facilities that they'll make, to accommodate some of them too. Do they all breathe oxygen, or probably not?
They're humans. We're talking humans.
Right.
Originally from Earth. German descent.
How long have they been off of Earth? Just a couple of, just like a millennia, right? Not longer than that.
Nothing longer than 400 years that I know of.
Now, that wouldn't cause any kind of evolutionary difference, right?
No.
That's
they are used to a higher level of technology than we have here. They are used to what is basically a galactic level 0 civilization, where all of your basic needs are met, and you have, unless you're military, you have free time to follow what your gifting is. And so they're going to be in a situation of having to rebuild that infrastructure. So it's going to be a challenge for some of them.
I was going to say that sounds like a paradise to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Having
it was
my
a
basic
paradise.
needs met.
The German civilization in space is basically a paradise, and they, except for their reliance on slavery, which is a very Earth thing, except for that, they were a level 0 civilization. And if they had stopped relying on the slavery part, they would have been left out there. They're only aggressive in the realm of in exchange for getting these planets in the Draco Empire, they are expected to do military service for the Draco. And that's the only place where they're really aggressive is when they're fulfilling their obligation to the Draco. So,
this is all stuff I'm not familiar with, but I'm enjoying listening to you talk about it. I'll tell you that.
the Draco are a empire made up of 7 reptilian races from the Draconis constellation, and the ones from Alpha, the one in the snake's mouth on the chart, are the ones in charge. And they have like 5 families that interbreed, and one of them will be the queen and her mother. So you have queen and queen mother, and one of her daughters will replace her when the time comes. And they have lots of kids, and the princesses are sent as emissaries to other worlds, especially ones that are a little bit rebellious. They'll send a princess to get them under control. And they're more telepathic than any other race I've ever encountered. And most humans are not hardwired for them. So they die from being in their presence. Not that they've done anything wrong. They're just a higher energy being, and human neurons can't handle it. So they have some of us were modified to be around them, and everybody else, the Draco leave them alone. They don't want to kill them. So that's why you don't see Draco running around on Earth, is because they don't want to kill us. So I find it personally appalling that so many people want to hate the Draco, because the Draco are bending over backwards to make sure you survive. They're protecting the planet from invasion. They're staying away so they don't kill you from the energy of their own bodies. And they're letting the elite run the planet. They're not interfering. They show up once a year on their terms, however long their orbit is. Once a year, they show up to get their taxes. That's it. And the Anunnaki have been paying the taxes on Earth this whole time, because technically the Anunnaki still rule the solar system.
So Earth has taxes as in a global tax.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. That's pretty crazy. What are those taxes in detail? Is it just gold, or?
It's a percentage of the gross planetary product.
Awesome.
So
that's awesome.
I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but it's anything the planet produces. They don't tax population increase, but they tax everything you do.
Right. Do these beings see the population increase as a problem?
No, the Anunnaki do, because when the population hits 10 million, we become telepathic. There's a population threshold. And when we become telepathic, they will no longer be able to control us. They won't be able to lie to us anymore.
Huh. That's not in our lifetime, that's for sure.
Well, if you look at the way population has increased over the last 100 years, you're looking at by 2200, 2200, we could be close. So that's why they're panicking about the population now. Why they started panicking last century was because the numbers were going up too fast. And once we become telepathic, they won't be able to control us.
Hmm.
That's part of why they've been tutoring me, is because I am telepathic. So they already know they can't lie to me.
I know that from our past discussions. I know that. I remember you saying that.
I make an effort to stay out of people's heads. I'll be upfront about that. And I really, really, really don't like people trying to read me or get into my head. For starters, most people are not well trained and they come in and it feels like somebody's stomping through my head in army boots.
That's true. I've heard that from a lot of people actually, because I'm not trained at all. Some have told me that I have the ability to be like a medium, or but I don't know if
Yeah.
that's telepathy in that sense, but or be like a
It's
clairvoyant.
part of the spectrum. But I've had too many readers and telepaths stomp through my head and leave me with an absolute headache. And I've had too many not disconnect.
Hmm.
So if they were going to just scan me, initial scan, see what I'm like, and then go away, I might be okay with it. But they don't do that. No, they connect into my head, they stomp around for a while, and then they don't leave. And so from time to time, they stomp around again. And I finally learned to be able to boot them out. But then they're all mad, like, well, I feel hostility off you. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
you've been sitting in my head for 3 days,
Right. Of course. Of course. That's like, I know you told me the stories of astral projection and things like that. I can astral project, but it's a weird thing. I'm not adept in it enough to do it on a constant basis whenever I want.
Most people do it every time they go to sleep. The trick is to remember it when you wake up.
That's true too. I don't remember my dreams ever. So I
And
guess.
going going astral, out of body, while you are awake and conscious, is something that most people don't manage to pull off either. But as the basic skill of going astral, you do that every time you go to sleep.
Hmm, that's pretty cool. I didn't think about it like
There's
that.
a lot of stuff to this world, isn't there?
Yeah. Geez, Penny, you're opening up so much of my brain. I don't know if I can handle it all at once.
Oh yeah, you can. You're doing fine.
I,
Um,
I try.
we are to the time on my show where I give you time to blatantly plug everything you do.
Awesome. 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 Thank you, Penny. First off, I want to say it's been an absolute pleasure. And I can't wait until you come on my show on Tuesday. And we're gonna shoot round two of this one because it's gonna be epic. So just to let everybody know, I am on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. You can find us at globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. We're also on iHeartRadio. My
Yeah.
shows that I do are on Mondays from 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do another show which is called The Seer and the Scholar. I do another show on Tuesday, which is it's called Full Spectrum Universe. It's from 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I also have a show at 8 p.m. this evening. It's the Full Spectrum Universe, but it's on a different network called the Argue Media Network from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So
You're busy.
yeah, I try. Well, I'm also in the middle of building a website. My website should be up in the next month. It's going to be Full Spectrum Universe. We're going to have a section of archived episodes of all the episodes that I'm incorporated in. Also, we're going to have a section of news where you're going to be able to find paranormal headlines, history, science, space. We're going to have a multitude of different writers when that comes. It's going to take time to get there, but
Yeah.
for all your news purposes, you can go there and read it. We're also going to have people's stories that they don't want to come on the show. They want to put it in written form. So we're going to have that there as well. So you can incorporate of different people's stories. And yeah, I also have a YouTube channel, which is Full Spectrum Universe, where you can find all the episodes of every show. I also have a Patreon, which is at Patreon, patreon.com/, Full Spectrum Universe. And yeah, I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on.
Well, I'm glad you had time to come on my show.
Of course, I would always make time for this show, Penny. When you asked me, I was super excited. I was super excited.
Well, we have a policy on the network of interviewing each other, and I've been going through about once a month and interviewing another host. And it gives a lot of input into some, from other perspectives. And I will say that you are quite prepared for here.
Thank you.
I was impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to come with something that was relatable to your audience, but also was something that gets talked about quite a bit from a perspective of both sides. I thought it would be intriguing to see
Yeah.
how they coincide on both sides. I really did. And I wanted to hear what you had to say. It was more for my benefit than we'll say the audience's benefit, bringing this up to you and letting you talk to me about your side of it, because I was interested in it. So, you know.
Yeah, my audience on YouTube has been complaining that I interrupt people.
No,
Well,
I don't think so. I watch your show. I don't think so.
thank you.
And
I figured it was a conversation.
Well, that's it. When you're talking to somebody, when you have something to add to it, it only helps, even the guests, it only helps to conceptualize what they're talking about. And I think that that's an amazing thing.
I think more people need to realize how many of the earlier UFO sightings and interactions were actually the Germans. Because when you take the classics of ufology, like the Betty and Barty Hill book, read it. They described a saucer ship with swastikas inside and humans wearing German uniforms, and there was a Scotsman on board and a single gray who was the navigator.
That tells it all right there. That tells it all.
You get the description and you know who they were. But because there was a single gray, it was a gray abduction.
Right. And see, it's something that you have to. It's just happenstance that the gray happened to be there. I'm sure that there was other ships with different types of alien navigators.
The navigator is who allows you to be able to go into hyperspace and come out without anybody in the wall.
Yeah.
That's what happened to the Eldridge. There wasn't a navigator. The machinery could not tell the difference between organic life forms and inorganic walls. And so you ended up with people in the wall, where with a navigator, everybody's separate. And I don't know if you know Tony Rodriguez, but when he describes it, they would go into space and something would happen and they were told they had to be still. That was to make it easier for the navigator to keep them from being inside an object.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Now, there are very few humans who have that capability. I only have it because I was DNA modified by the CIA before I was born. So yeah, my first abduction, I wasn't even born yet. And I would say 99% of the navigators are ETs. Fewer than 1% are human or a human hybrid. That's what they considered me. So because of that DNA modification, I was considered a human hybrid. So,
Wow.
but yeah, that was the CIA was like, oh my God, we hit the jackpot with that one. We got a navigator. And when they broke my shoulder in June of 2019, they told me it was because I was reintegrating altars that were navigators.
Oh, wow.
That I was to not do that again.
Like
And to
you
be
could
honest,
help it.
oh, I was reintegrating on purpose. This was something I was working on, and because I want to be whole, and they have to come in a certain order to fill in the holes properly. They have to come in the order they were created. And so I've reintegrated 31 altars. And that is a process. It takes time and work and a lot of effort and shamanic trance and Jungian shadow work and a lot of it. And I had just reintegrated the altar who had been in Kruger and transferred to Nacht Waffen. She served a 20-year tour, and I had just reintegrated her whenever they decided to do this. It was, oh no, you're not going to do this anymore. Now, I will be honest, I have not had the balls to try another one since. The surgery took 4 hours. I still can't put my left arm behind my back. I have to have help dressing and undressing because of the shoulder injury. And it's something that, you know, they pulled me out for a mission and I did their mission. And on the way back, 3 of them in black fatigues told me that one of them, 2 of them held my body still, and the one that wrenched my shoulder and dislocated it and ripped it told me, well, we know we can't kill you. We don't know why, but we figured out we can cause you pain. We don't want you reintegrating any more altars that are navigators. And then broke it. I mean, you remember that.
Wow.
You know, that
Wow.
you remember, and it makes you think 3 or 4 times before you do that again. And if I'm ever going to be whole, I have to ignore them and keep moving. But at the same time, I don't want that. I've already had I've had surgery on that shoulder twice. I don't want to do that again. The surgeon told me we're not going to be able to fix it if it's broke again.
Yeah, no. Sometimes it's irreparable. Irreparable. I can't say it. It's too much damage for them to fix.
Yeah,
it's just too much. Irreparable. That's what I was trying to say. Irreparable.
The surgeon was one that used to work out of Stanford University, and he was the guy that fixed other people's screw ups. And he did a great job. He just said, you know, the damage is so extensive that if you injure this again, we're not going to be able to fix it. So, you know, knowing that, and that it's over a year post-op, and I'm still having issues with it aches so bad I have trouble sleeping at night, that, you know, I may not be able to force myself to reintegrate anymore.
I wouldn't. I mean, if it's going to cause you that much stress and that much damage, I wouldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't.
So I got completely off topic. Anyway, we are at the end of our time. Thank you so much for coming, Rob.
Thank you
And
so much for having me, Penny. It was such a pleasure. It was such an honor, too. Thank you.
And for my audience, stay tuned for Goddesses and Devils with Katie Camara and Amanda McManus.